Chapter 4509. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mo smirked. Don't worry. Even if I advance, I'll be fine. Furthermore, we haven't found the children yet. Where we find a time to stop and refine pills and advance. Feng Jiu wanted to say something, but he held her hand and stood up. Let's go to the mortal world to look for them. He waved his hand, and a whirlpool appeared beside him. Then, he led her into the whirlpool. As the two disappeared into the whirlpool also disappeared in the air, as if it had never appeared 3 months later in the evening. A carriage was moving along the mountain road. Seeing that there was no one around, 17, who was driving the carriage, raised his guard. Seeing that the sky was gradually darkening, 17 said to the 3 people in the carriage, Young Master Hao, it's getting dark. Shall we find a place to rest for the night? Shall we continue tomorrow? In the carriage, Mu Chun held a night pearl in his hand and shone it on the side. He sat obediently at the side and didn't make a fuss. Hao was sat between the two of them and was looking at a map. Hearing 17's words, Hao moved his hand on the map and said, No need. Continue along this road and stop when we reach the end. Yes, 17 replied respectfully and continued to drive the carriage forward. Big brother, is there no road here? Mu Chun pointed at the place on the map and asked. No, it's just that after we reach here, the carriage can't move. We have to walk. Look here, as long as we cross these mountains, we can reach this sea area. The floating Fate Immortal Island is on the other side of this sea area. Hao looked at the map and taught them to look at it. In the carriage, Hao set up a soundproof enchantment and explained some things to Mu Chun and Mu Yu in detail. When the sky darkened and the carriage stopped, he removed the enchantment with a wave of his hand and lifted the curtain at the same time. Young Master Hao, there's no road ahead. 17 looked at the pitch-black darkness in front of him and looked around worriedly. As night fell, he could faintly hear the roars of wild beasts. Hao and the other 2 alighted from the carriage one after another. After looking around, Hao walked forward but was stopped by 17. Young Master Hao, you can't go any further. There's a cliff in front. 17 hurriedly reminded him, worried that he would accidentally fall. The carriage continued to climb along the mountain path until there was no road left. However, it was still on top of a cliff. Let's rest here tonight. We'll leave tomorrow. Hao then turned to Mu Chun and Mu Yu. You 2 go back to the carriage and rest. I'll go pick up some branches to start a fire. It won't be too cold at night. As 17 spoke, she was about to head into the forest. Unexpectedly, Hao shook his head. It's already dark. There should be a lot of wild beasts around here. You shouldn't go. He looked at 17 and said, We've been on this journey for 3 months. We're not far from our destination. Do you want to go back, or do you want to come with us? 17 left the Pan family, and the 3 masters are already 17's masters. 17 will naturally follow the masters. How can I go back? He hurriedly said. Chapter 4510. Seeing this, 17 looked at him uneasily and nervously, worried that he would chase him away. You've been with us for almost 2 years. You should know that we're immortal cultivators, and you're just a mortal. The place we're going to is a place where immortal cultivators live. It's very difficult for mortals to survive there. Moreover, there are many dangers around us. If you follow us, who knows when you'll die in the hands of an immortal cultivator? Hao looked at him and analyzed the pros and cons. If you leave now, I can give you a treasure. If you return to the Pan family, you can live a peaceful life. However, if you come with us, I can't guarantee your safety. After all, I still have my brother and sister to protect. There are many times when I won't be able to take care of you. So, you have to think carefully. 17 thought for a moment and asked, Young Master Hao, are there no mortals in the place where the immortals live? Of course not. Not everyone can become immortals. Those without spiritual roots are mortals. It's just that it's hard for mortals to survive in a place where the immortals live. 17 wants to follow the 3 masters. He said firmly, When we get there, Young Master Hao, you don't have to worry about 17. 17 will not cause you any trouble. 17 can take care of young Master Chun and Miss Yu's daily life and follow them to protect them. In his opinion, young Master Hao was very powerful, but Mu Chun and Mu Yu were only 4 years old. They still needed an adult to take care of them. Yu looked at 17 and then at her brother. She smiled and said, "Brother, let 17 follow us. With him, I won't need you to accompany me when I go out." "All right, Hao," replied and looked at 17. "Tonight, I'll tell you about some places in the immortal cultivation world. Listen carefully and remember it. When we get there, we have to be careful and keep a low profile." "Yes." 17 couldn't help but be delighted, and a smile appeared on his face. That night, Mu Chun and Mu Yu slept comfortably in the carriage while Hao talked to 17 the whole night. When the sky brightened, Hao walked forward and looked at the distance between the clouds. The place where they stood was about 70 to 80 meters away from the cliff on the opposite side. Moreover, there was mist in the air, so they couldn't see clearly. Hao had to use his divine sense to find out the distance. After waking Mu Chun and Mu Yu up and having some food, Hao took out the aircraft. With a toss of his hand, the aircraft grew bigger in front of them. "Come up," Hao shouted and got them to sit on the aircraft. Then, the aircraft flew towards the cliff on the other side. This was the first time 17 was flying in the air on a flying device. Even though he was a grown man, his face was still pale with fright. Both of his hands were tightly gripping the edges of the flying device. 17's face turned pale from fright. Yu was all smiles as she looked at his nervous face. She herself wasn't afraid. Instead, she was very curious as she looked all around. She and her brother had aircraft too. However, Big Brother had instructed him not to take it out casually. Chapter 45:11. When he stood on the ground, 17's legs were weak, and his face was slightly pale. He never thought that he would fly in the sky one day. That kind of excitement made his hair stand on end, even though he had undergone special training. Looking at the three little masters, each one more calm than the other, he couldn't help but feel that he was really too useless. Hao looked at the endless sea in front of him and said, "Let's rest first. The floating fate immortal island is on the other side of the sea, but it's a little far away." "Big Brother, are we still going to take the flying device?" Yu asked. "Yes, we can only go there by flying device." Hao nodded and looked at them. "Let's rest first and eat something." He turned to 17 and asked, "Are you okay?" "Young Master Hao, don't worry. I'm fine." It was his first time flying in the sky, so he wasn't used to it yet. However, he would get used to it after a while. They rested by the sea for a while. Afternoon, Hao continued to take them to the surface of the sea in the aircraft, preparing to cross the seemingly endless sea. Even though the aircraft was flying in the air, it was only early in the morning of the next day that they could faintly see the land that appeared in their line of sight. "I see it, young Master Hao. It's the land in front," 17 said with some surprise. Looking at the land in front of them, his eyes were filled with excitement. It turned out that the place where immortal cultivators lived was so far away from where mortals lived. If it weren't for the aircraft, mortals wouldn't have been able to come to such a place, let alone see the land hidden on the other side of the sea. In the morning light, Hao's aircraft slowly landed in a forest on the side of the land. He put away the aircraft and looked at the surrounding environment. "When we're here, you must be vigilant and careful." "Yes," 17 replied. "Okay." Mu Chun and Mu Yu also responded. Seeing him take out the map and check it, Mu Chun asked, "Big Brother, are we in the forest now? Why don't we use the aircraft to fly out of here?" Hao looked at the map and frowned. This map only shows how to get to the floating fate immortal island. As for the route here, it's blank. The golden toad demon probably never left, so it wasn't drawn. He raised his head to look at Mu Chun. "Moreover, if the aircraft is seen by those who are stronger than us, it's hard to guarantee that they won't be greedy for it. That's why it's best to avoid using it when we're here." Hearing this, they nodded and came to a realization. "We came here mainly to find out how to get back. Now that we're here and in this forest, it's a good opportunity to bring you guys to gain experience in this forest and increase your combat power." Hao looked at them as he spoke. He put away the map and led them into the forest. This was a training forest. Back then, the golden toad demon had cultivated here for 500 years. Therefore, there were many ferocious beasts and demonic beasts here. In the early morning forest, the faint roars of ferocious beasts could be heard, as well as the chirping of birds on the branches. 3 children and an adult were shuttling through the forest where the weeds were half the height of a person. It was a very strange scene. Roar. Chapter 45:12. Be careful. 17 cried out in alarm. Shielding the 2 little ones behind him, he pulled out the sword from his waist and slashed towards a huge tusk boar. Clang! However, when he slashed with his sword, it made a clanging sound as if he was slashing an iron plate. The hand holding the sword was shaken to the point of pain. Just when he was in a daze, he saw Mu Chun leaping up. His small body directly sat on the back of that tusk boar. The dagger in his hand was filled with a breath that was visible to the naked eye, and with a speed that was too fast for the ears to cover, he stabbed towards the bottom of its neck. Whoosh! Roar! The sharp blade pierced through and was fiercely pulled out. Fresh blood spurted out like a pillar of blood. The wild-tusked boar howled miserably and fiercely flung away the small figure riding on its back. Seeing Mu Chun being thrown away, Hao Er's heart was raised. He wanted to go forward to help, but he forcefully restrained himself. This was only a low-level, ordinary beast. If they couldn't even defeat this ordinary beast, then there was no need to talk about any experience. Brother, be careful. You were softly called out. Seeing him being thrown down, and that beast once again bumping towards the direction where he was thrown, she hurriedly rushed forward. At the same time, she pulled out her dagger, and, at the same time, her small figure actually drilled towards the bottom of that beast, directly stabbing upwards from below. Howard didn't expect that she would actually be so daring. He was so scared that his whole body was covered in cold sweat. He took a step forward, but when he saw her stabbing the neck of that beast with her dagger, blood splashing all over her body, he stopped in his tracks. However, his heart was in his throat. Only when he saw her drilled out from under that beast and retreated did he finally relax. When Mu Chun was thrown away, he jumped high in the air. His small body somersaulted in midair and steadily landed on the ground. When he saw his little sister drilled under that beast without any regard for her life, he was so scared that his face turned pale. Roar! That tusk boar howled. Because of the 2 daggers stabbing its vital points, blood gushed out. Following the loss of blood, its 4 hooves were somewhat weak. Its huge body swayed and hit a tree at the side, crushing it before it got up again. When Mu Chun saw this, he immediately rode up and dug out the crystal core from the beast's head. As the crystal core was dug out, the huge beast also fell with a loud crash. Bang! A heavy sound rang out, and even the ground shook slightly. Hao Er looked at this scene, and at the same time, at his brother and sisters full of satisfaction and joy. Although the 2 of them were only 4 years old, their courage and insight had been honed. They were also very agile. With their strength and their small bodies, it was already very impressive for them to be able to kill this low-level tusk boar. Compared to Hao's, 17 was stunned. He's of his heart. Was this really something a 3- or 4-year-old child could do? Big brother, we can protect ourselves when we encounter danger. Chapter 45:13. Looking at them, 17 couldn't help but swallow his saliva. He only knew that the 2 little masters in front of him had really refreshed his worldview and understanding. In contrast, the skills and fighting strength he was so proud of were actually too weak compared to them. Thinking that he couldn't even compare to a 4-year-old child, he couldn't help but burst into tears. As it turned out, he was the one who should be protected. Only heaven knew that he had been protecting these 2 little masters all along the way, but now, he suddenly felt so useless. What should he do? Miss you, Master Chun. Why are you so powerful? He faintly asked, looking as if he had suffered a blow. Because we were personally taught by Big Brother. Big Brother told us that when dealing with a ferocious beast, we have to attack its fatal points. You are said with a smile. Looking at 17, she said, "This boar is a low-level ferocious beast, but it's a metal-attributed ferocious beast. Its skin is very hard and also very sturdy. Cutting its skin won't hurt it. You can only attack below its neck. That's its fatal point. Only by attacking its fatal point can you kill it." 17's eyes lit up. "So that's how it is." 17, "Cut some meat from this boar and roast it. The ferocious beast's meat has a spiritual aura. Eating it can strengthen one's body." "How?" said, letting him cut some meat from the boar first. "Yes." 17 hurriedly responded. "How?" Walked forward and came to Ur's side. With a cold face, he said, "Do you know that what you did just now was very dangerous? If you didn't dodge from under that boar, do you know that you would have been trampled to death?" Lowered her head and whispered, "But I could have dodged." "Then what if you couldn't?" Ur's face was stiff and his voice was cold. "No matter what you do, you can't put yourself in danger. Haven't I taught you before?" Hearing this, Ur's head hung even lower. She held the dagger in her hand and whispered, "Big brother, I'm sorry. Knows her mistake. Won't do it again." "Little sister, do you know that you scare me just now? What if you were trampled to death? It would be ugly to be trampled to death." Chun also said with a cold face, putting on the airs of an older brother. "I'll be careful in the future. I won't do it again," she said softly. Ur's expression eased up when he saw this, and he said, "All right, the blood on your body will attract other ferocious beasts. See if there's a water source nearby, and wash yourself clean first." He turned around and looked at 17, who was squatting on the ground and cutting the meat with his back facing them. He walked up to him and looked. The corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. The tusked boar that weighed more than 1,000 kilograms was actually skinned by the knife in his hand. That scene was truly a little frightening. "Young Master Hal, we don't need this pig skin. I cut off 2 hind legs. If we use these 2 hind legs to roast, it should be enough for us to eat for a few days." 17 dragged the 2 hind legs to her side. Thought for a moment and took out a chinquin bag from his space. He put the 2 pig legs inside and said, "Let's find a water source first and wash the bloodstains." "All right." Chapter 45:14. They continued to walk forward and found a water source. They washed the blood off their bodies and changed their clothes. Then they found a place to sit down and rest. 17. This is the introductory mantra for cultivation. Try to cultivate it. See if you can condense spiritual energy. How? Handed him a mantra. Because he did not have spiritual energy, he could not even open his heaven-earth bag. It was very inconvenient to walk in this forest without a heaven-earth bag. Thus, he gave him the introductory mantra to try. At his age, it would be very difficult for him to cultivate. However, regardless of whether he had any cultivation, as long as he could condense spiritual energy and sense the existence of spiritual energy, he could use the heaven-earth bag. "Young Master Hal, is this for me? I can cultivate it too?" 17 was so excited that he could not find his words. He could not believe that he would give him something like this. This is a more common introductory mantra in the cultivation world. As long as you can condense spiritual energy, you can use the heaven-earth bag in the future. Try it. Placed the mantra in his hand and said, "Also, eat more ferocious beast meat. It's good for you." "Yes, thank you, young Master Hal." 17 immediately stood up and knelt down on one knee. "All right, I also wanted to ask you. I saw that your dissection technique was a little different. Have you learned it before?" Howard looked at him strangely. Thinking about the scene of flesh and bone returning to bone, he felt a little strange. Hearing this, 17 grinned and said, "In the future, when I train the Dark Guard camp, I will be in charge of the food for the Dark Guards for a period of time. I have killed thousands of pigs, so I know how to deal with those beasts." Hearing this, could not help but purse his lips. All right, so he was doing the work of slaughtering pigs in the Dark Guard camp. They rested in the forest. 17 also seized the time to memorize the mantra and cultivate according to How's instructions. At night, they roasted meat and found a relatively safe place to rest. They prepared to rest until they had enough energy to continue tomorrow. 17, was responsible for keeping watch at night. At the same time, he also tried to draw energy into his body. However, after a day, he did not gain anything. However, after eating the barbecued meat, he felt a warm current surging in his body. Thus, he tried again. That night, he tried again and again. One morning, 8 days later, 17 shouted in surprise, "Young master, how I think I've already drawn chi into my body." How? I was a little surprised. He glanced at him and nodded. "That's right. You're indeed drawing chi into your body. You're a little fast." His tone was a little strange, and his gaze was somewhat sizing him up. One had to know that it would take at least 10 days to half a month for an average person to draw chi into their body. Some might even take a few months. However, he only took 7 or 8 days. Could it be that 17 was a good seedling for cultivation? How? Guessed in his heart and sized him up. Then, he handed him a chinquin bag. "This is for you. You can store things in the future." "Thank you, young master Hao." 17 happily took it and looked at it carefully. It was just a small and inconspicuous bag, but he had seen them take out a lot of things from it. Chapter 45:15. Okay, the two answered and nodded. After tidying up, they followed him forward. 17 walked in front, using the sword in his hand to cut down the weeds that were half the height of a person to make a path. At the same time, he used the sword to slap the surrounding weeds to prevent poisonous snakes from escaping. They had lived in this area for 7 or 8 days and were quite familiar with the surroundings. They knew that if they wanted to leave this place, they had to leave this area that they were familiar with first before they could find a way out. After walking in the woods for a long time, it was almost noon. They were about to find a place to rest when they heard rustling sound around them. They looked around vigilantly and saw a few figures darting out from the trees and surrounding them. "Who is it?" 17 shouted. He held the sword in his hand and looked vigilantly at the people who suddenly appeared around them. However, when he saw the powerful aura emitted from those people and the strong smell of blood, his heart couldn't help but jump slightly. He was a little nervous and worried. The people surrounding them were all strong and had a fierce look on their faces. The murderous aura emitted from them was so intimidating. He, who had lived on the edge of the knife, was no stranger to that murderous aura. However, he was worried that if a fight broke out, even if young Master Hao was skilled, they would not be a match for these people. "Big brother, it's actually a few children and a guard who has just drawn chi into his body." A man with a scar on his face said in surprise as he stared at Hao and the others. A one-eyed man with a long sword hanging at his waist walked out. His sharp and vicious gaze swept past 17, directly ignoring her. Then it landed on Hao, Mu Chun, and Mu Yu, sizing them up. "Children." He narrowed his eyes and stared at them. "Where did you come from? Who did you come with?" Hao looked at the man and used his body to protect Mu Chun and Mu Yu behind him. His cold little face was indifferent and expressionless. He said, "We got separated from our family and lost our way here." "Oh, is that so?" The one-eyed man stared at him. Suddenly, his gaze swept towards 17, who was at the side. He released his pressure and enveloped 17. His voice was gloomy and filled with viciousness. "Tell me, where did you guys come from? Why would he appear here? Tell me the truth, or I'll kill you." Bang! Under the pressure of the other party, 17 knelt down without any resistance. His face turned pale in an instant. He only felt a powerful force pressing down on him, making it impossible for him to stand up straight. Even breathing was difficult for him. Fortunately, after that person's voice fell, the pressure on his body retracted a little, allowing him to catch his breath. 17, you're softly called, and somewhat worriedly looked at him. Hao protected Mu Chun and Mu Yu as he stared vigilantly at the people around them, in case they suddenly attacked. With his brother and sister skills, they could still deal with low-level ferocious beasts, but if they were to face these people, they would not even have a chance to fight back. We've definitely been separated from our families, and I'm the only one left with the 3 young masters. Seniors, we've only come here because we've lost our way. Please be magnanimous. He clasped his fists and said. Chapter 45:16. Judging from your extraordinary bearing at such a young age, I'm sure you're not from an ordinary family. Since you've lost your way here, you'll have to follow us. Once we're out of here, we'll inform your families and let them bring you back. 17's heart sank when he heard this. With his experience, he naturally knew what these people meant. This was clearly an attempt to control them. Once they were out of the forest, their families would pay the ransom to ransom them. He couldn't help but look at Howard, wanting to know what he meant. If that's the case, then many thanks. Howard looked at the one-eyed man and said, when we get home, we'll definitely let our parents thank all of you. He revealed a relieved smile, as if he was happy that they were willing to escort them out of the city. Ewer blinked and asked innocently, Big brother, does that mean we don't have to be afraid of those frightening beasts anymore? With Uncle and the rest protecting us, we won't be eaten by the beasts, right? Yes, they're very powerful. If we follow them, we won't be eaten by the beasts. Ow! I looked back at the two of them and said. 17 heard their words and understood Howard's meaning. He immediately cupped his hands and said to the man, Thank you, Senior. We'll have to trouble you all along the way. No problem. The one-eyed man curled the corner of his mouth, revealing a fake smile. He glanced at the three children, then raised his hand and waved. The burly men surrounding them with swords put away their swords and surrounded them, preventing them from escaping. Howard brought Mu Chun and Mu Yu with him, while 17 walked behind them. Seeing that they didn't seem to want to rest, Howard said to 17, 17, Ewer is very tired. Carry her on your back. Yes, 17 replied and squatted down. Miss Ewer, I'll carry you. Seeing her big brother was looking at her, Ewer obediently lied down on his back. Then hugging 17's neck, she comfortably lied down on his back to rest. Chinner, are you tired? Ow. Or looked at Mu Chun beside him and asked. Mu Chun shook his head and struggled to follow her with his short legs. I can walk by myself. Hearing this, Howard revealed a smile and said, If you can't walk anymore, just tell me, and I'll carry you. The one-eyed man in front glanced back at them and continued to walk. After walking for a while, he suddenly raised his hand and stopped. Alert! As soon as his voice fell, the roar of a beast could be heard. Roar! Roar! They were two powerful, ferocious beasts. They bared their sharp fangs and lowered their bodies as they roared at them. The deafening roar carried the pressure of the ferocious beasts, causing the surrounding low-level ferocious beasts to flee in all directions. Howard was protecting Mu Chun and 17, who was carrying Mu Yu. His calm gaze swept across the two beasts before he looked at the one-eyed man. At the same time, he retreated until he was under a big tree and stopped to watch. These people seemed to be used to dealing with these vicious beasts. They didn't show any fear or panic. Instead, under the command of the one-eyed man, the group of more than a dozen people quickly surrounded the two vicious beasts and attacked them together. Chapter 45:17. While those people were fighting and not paying attention to them, 17 lowered her voice and asked, Young Master How, what should we do? Run now? We can't run now. Ow. It was said in a low voice while paying attention to the people in front of them. He said, That one-eyed guy has been staring at us. We can't escape now. If we do, we'll offend them and they'll want to kill us. Let's wait for an opportunity. He paused and lowered his voice again. Before that, we have to lower their guard. When the time is right, it won't be too late to run. Okay. Mu Chun and Mu Yu responded in a low voice. Those people's fighting power was very strong, and they cooperated well with each other. It didn't take long for the two beasts to be killed. Howard and the others watched. They dug out the beast crystals and gave them to the one-eyed man. The others began to deal with the two beasts, cutting off the valuable parts and putting them in their cosmos bags. Howard had some thoughts in his mind, so he was also observing the fighting power of these people. Among these people, except for the one-eyed man who was in the Golden Core stage, the others were in the Foundation Establishment stage. He didn't know what kind of existence these people were in this place. He also didn't know how strong a Golden Core stage cultivator was in this place. One had to know that because they wanted to keep a low profile and try their best not to cause any trouble or danger, the three of them had concealed their strength just so that they could use this kind of low profile to save their lives when they encountered danger. Actually, in this situation, it wasn't that they had no way to escape from these people's control. After all, he still had a powerful silver wolf in the space. If he summoned it out, let alone these people, even if there were a few more batches, they wouldn't be a match for the silver wolf. However, unless it was really necessary, he couldn't let others know about the silver wolf's existence. Moreover, he wanted to use these people to lead the way so that they could leave this forest. If Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu were here and knew all this, they would be proud of Hao Er's intelligence and calmness. Even if he was only about 10 years old, he could calmly analyze the pros and cons and make the most correct plan. Their teachings were not in vain. "You guys come over here," the one-eyed man called out, beckoning Hao Er and the others over. Seeing this, Hao Er and the others walked over and stood beside him. "You used to go out with your elders to catch ferocious beasts?" The one-eyed man's gaze fell on Hao Er and then glanced at the two little ones. "No." Hao Er shook his head. "No?" He sneered, looked at the three of them, and said, "You look young, but your mouths are full of lies. Moreover, you don't even blink when you lie. If it weren't for me, I would have thought that I was deceived by you." Hao Er looked at him and didn't say anything, waiting for him to explain himself. Two high-level ferocious beasts. Even if an adult saw them, they would turn pale and panic. But the few of you didn't even make sound. You've been hiding under the trees and watching quietly since just now. I don't see any of you being frightened. Chapter 45:18. Hao Er pursed his lips when he heard that. So that was the case. 17 was also taken aback. They had been in the forest for the past 7 or 8 days. Other than the first time he cried out in fright, he rarely saw young Master Hao, young Master Chun, and Miss Yu scream in fright. Most of the time, young Master Hao was expressionless, while the two little ones looked even more excited. He was already used to their reactions. Now that he heard the one-eyed man's words, he was shocked to realize that their reactions were indeed a little abnormal in the eyes of these people. This that 17's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly opened her mouth with some embarrassment and said with an embarrassed smile, "It's like this. Our young master, Hao, has never had any expression on his face since he was young. Even if he was afraid, he wouldn't show it. Little young master and little miss are only 4 years old. Moreover, weren't the various seniors present? It's only because the seniors are here that we can be at ease." This explanation was reasonable. When the one-eyed man heard this, he glanced at the guard called 17 and then looked at the two little ones. He saw the little boy's face was tense and his little lips were pursed as he stared at him fearlessly. His appearance was just like a little tiger. The little girl on 17's back was also blinking her clear eyes and looking at him blankly. Perhaps it was because lying on 17's back was very relaxing and comfortable. The little girl yawned and rubbed her eyes. Her little face looked a little sleepy. Could it be that he was really paranoid? The one-eyed man looked at the expressionless little boy again. Seeing that little face, it seemed that it was really as 17 said. He had facial paralysis. That better be the case. If I find out what tricks you are up to, I will not let you off easily, the one-eyed man warned in a gloomy voice. Then he looked at his subordinates and ordered, "Move quickly." The group set off again and quickly left this place that was stained with the smell of blood. As they walked in the forest, suddenly they heard voices and footsteps ahead. Hao Er and the rest looked ahead and saw a group of mercenaries of about 30 people. They stopped when they saw the one-eyed man and the others. The leader went forward to greet them. "Ha ha, it's Brother Darkwood. I didn't expect to meet you here." That mercenary leader seemed to know him. He went up and greeted him with a smile. At the same time, he used his hand to pat his shoulder. His gaze swept over, and when he saw Hao and the others following behind, he was slightly surprised. "Brother Darkwood, why are there such young children in your team?" "Hee. We met them on the way here. When we get out of here, their families will come and take them back," the one-eyed man said as he glanced back at Hao and the others. "These children are quite good-looking and their temperament is not bad either. They should be the children of some big family. Congratulations, Brother Heimu. This time, you've earned a lot of money again. Ha 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 ha. That person clasped his hands together and laughed. Chapter 45:19. The two men thought that Hao and the rest didn't hear what they were talking about, or that they weren't afraid of being heard. After all, in their eyes, they didn't pose a threat at all. After the two of them chatted for a while, the man cupped his fists and took his leave. He led his team in another direction. On this side, the one-eyed man in front led them forward again. It was not until evening that they found a place to rest in the forest. As night fell, the air became colder. These people didn't light a fire. Instead, they all jumped on trees not far away to rest. How? And the rest were also carried up the tree. A man stared at them and said, "Don't move. If you fall from here, you'll break your limbs even if you don't die." How and 17 stayed by Mu Chun and Mu Yu's side to prevent them from falling or being bitten by insects. We still have some roasted meat left from yesterday. Although it's a little hard, we can still make do with it. 17 took out some jerky from her Cosmos bag and gave it to them. The three of them took it and sat on the tree to eat while looking at the people in the surrounding trees. Those people looked like they were casually finding a place to rest, but they were guarding this place tightly. Having lived here for 7 to 8 days, they naturally knew that at night, the trees were safer than below. However, it didn't mean that there was no danger in the trees. After all, there were occasionally poisonous snakes coiled around the branches, ready to take their lives at any time. Sitting high up, they could faintly see a flickering fire in the distance. Obviously, there were people resting in the distance. As the night deepened, two men used the excuse of relieving themselves to quietly head over there to see who was there. However, not long after they left, the one-eyed man and his subordinates on the tree heard the clanging of swords and sabers as well as a blood-curdling screech. Almost instinctively, the one-eyed man, who was only a few meters away from Hao and the rest, quickly jumped up. With a gloomy gaze, he rushed up and shouted sternly, "Follow me to take a look." Yes. Those people responded and quickly followed. After a while, only Hao and 17 were left. "The two people from before should have been killed," 17 said. As 17 spoke, she stood on the tree and looked at the flames in the distance. The originally tranquil forest became chaotic as the sounds of battle spread. "Big brother, should we go and take a look?" You were asked softly. She also looked into the distance like 17. However, she was small and couldn't see anything. She only heard the clanging of swords and screams in the forest. "Let's go later to avoid being accidentally injured by the sword," Aura said, and asked them to wait while carefully listening to the movement in front of them. The sounds of battle continued for quite a while, accompanied by screams from time to time. They couldn't see it from where they were, but when they heard the screams, they tensed up and zest. Chapter 45:20. Blood seeped out of the one-eyed man's body and dripped down. As he approached, the smell of blood in the air became heavier. Seeing the murderous aura on his body, Hao shielded Mu Chun and Mu Yu behind him. 18 brothers, all dead. Little brat, you can go to hell too. The one-eyed man's gloomy voice sounded. The next moment, his body flew down from above like a bat. He reached out to strangle Hao-er's neck, ready to strangle them all here. His men were killed by those mercenaries, and it would be troublesome to bring these brats out. It was better to strangle them here and let him vent his anger. Seeing the rising murderous aura on his body, Hao-er's eyes turned cold, and he shouted, "Back off!" As soon as his voice fell, his hand moved and a long sword appeared in his hand. With a surge of thought, his hidden strength burst out in an instant. Whoosh! Taking advantage of the moment when his strength burst forth, the sharp sword in his hand pierced towards the chest of the attacking figure with a speed that was too fast for one to cover one's ears. The speed of the sword was so fast and fierce that even the one-eyed man who had experienced hundreds of battles couldn't react in time. Hiss! Because of that moment of distraction, he missed the opportunity to avoid the sword and only saw the long sword pierce his chest with a whoosh. This is impossible. His eyes widened in shock, and he looked in disbelief at the little boy in front of him who was only about 10 years old, but had the strength of a golden core cultivator. He couldn't believe that he could have such fast reaction speed and instantly stab his fatal spot with a sword. The moment Hao shouted, 17 quickly retreated with Mu Chun and Mu Yu. At the same time, she protected them behind her, just in case. After Hao-Er's sword stabbed down, he condensed spiritual power in his palm and fiercely attacked. When it hit the one-eyed man's body with a heavy bang, the sword in his chest was pulled back, and at the same time, a column of blood flowed out. The one-eyed man, who was originally injured from the encirclement, originally wanted to kill these few brats to vent his anger while escaping, but unexpectedly, he fell into the hands of these brats that he didn't even care about at all. Hao-Er's face was cold as he watched the one-eyed man stumble backward with blood flowing from his mouth. He was about to die. He held the sword in his hand and gathered his spiritual energy. He raised it again, and the sword flashed. A cold light slashed across the one-eyed man's neck. Swish! The faint sound of sword chi dissipated in the air, and the figure who was leaning against the tree was frozen in place. His eyes were wide open and filled with shock. A trace of blood seeped out from his throat and slid down bit by bit until the last trace of life in his body disappeared. He stood there stiffly, staring straight ahead. "Young Master Hao, there are people coming from over there," 17 shouted in a low voice. She was a little worried as she looked at the numerous figures rushing in their direction. Hao-Er glanced in that direction and retreated sideways. He came in front of Mu Chun and Mu Yu, holding the long sword in his hand to protect them. He made a vigilant posture and suppressed his strength at the same time. A few figures shuttled through the forest. When they passed by, the leaves rustled. One of them could faintly hear someone shouting, "Hurry up! He's right in front. Don't let him escape." Chapter 45:21. You killed him. One of the men, who was in his 20s, looked at the little boy, who had a cold expression on his face. His eyes were filled with disbelief. This kid looked no more than 10 years old, right? He actually killed the one-eyed man? Hao-Er stared at the three people in front of him, and a dark light flashed across his eyes. Two of them were mid-foundation establishment cultivators, and a middle-aged man was a golden core cultivator. He thought for a while, and under the questioning and astonished gazes of the three people, he glanced at the badges on their mercenary uniforms and said, "You are mercenaries?" The middle-aged man put away his astonishment and looked at these people. His gaze swept past 17, who was wearing a guard's uniform, and then looked at the two small figures behind her. He frowned, and finally his gaze landed on the little boy, who was about 10 years old, and said, "As you can see, we are indeed mercenaries." Hearing this, Hao-Er pointed his sword at the dead one-eyed man and said coldly, "I killed this man. I'll give you all his valuables as a reward for hiring you to escort us out of the forest." Hearing this, the middle-aged man raised his eyebrows and stared at the little boy. He was very curious. What kind of family raised this child? At such a young age, he had the courage to not panic in the face of danger, and he could even handle things so calmly. "You're so shameless, kid. This person was clearly heavily injured by us. Otherwise, how could you have killed him with your strength?" The man beside him snorted coldly. He felt that this person's valuables should belong to their mercenary team. Hao-Er's gaze landed on that person, and he said, "He died under my sword." When a young man heard this, he couldn't help but be annoyed. Just as he was about to speak, the middle-aged man raised his hand to signal for him to stop. "Even if what you said is the truth, that you killed this person and the property belongs to you, we can still kill you and the property will naturally belong to us. There's no need for us to escort you out of the forest, right?" The middle-aged man smirked as he stared at Hao-Er. Hao-Er looked at the middle-aged man and said unhurriedly, "A mercenary team that has been certified by the Mercenary Guild wouldn't choose to kill and rob under normal circumstances. Moreover, you could get a large sum of money from this person by protecting our children. You won't lose out." Hearing that, the middle-aged man smiled. I can see that you're not from an ordinary family. All right, I'll make the decision and accept your mission. Vice Commander, a young man next to him shouted in disapproval. It doesn't matter. We're going back anyway. Besides, they're just a few kids. Let's just take them along. As the middle-aged man spoke, he gestured, Go, take everything from the one-eyed man. Yes. The two men responded and stepped forward. After taking all the items from the man's body, they stood beside him. Where are you going? The middle-aged man said and turned to walk back. However, the rest followed from a distance behind. Muchin lowered his voice and asked, Big brother, can these people be trusted? Chapter 45:22. Hearing this, they nodded and made a mental note. They walked forward, and after a while, they came to the place where the bonfire was lit. There was still the smell of blood around. The corpses on the ground had obviously been disposed of. There were no corpses around, only some bloodstains. More than 30 mercenaries were either standing or sitting around talking. Among the mercenaries, there were a few young men and women. Old Zheng, how was it? Did you catch the person? Another middle-aged man saw them come back and asked. His gaze turned and landed on 17 and the few children behind them with some surprise. Where did this child come from? And he's so young? The middle-aged man frowned and stared at Mu Chun and Mu Yu, then at Hao and finally at 17. He saw that this man who looked like a guard was actually a young cultivator who had just drawn qi into his body not long ago. Haha, leader, it's like this that the middle-aged man who brought Hao and the rest oversmiled and glanced back at Hao and the rest. He then walked to the middle-aged man's side and briefly explained the matter to him. What? You're saying that after the one-eyed man escaped, he was killed by this kid? The leader pointed at Hao with some astonishment. Hao frowned and was a little unhappy that someone was pointing at him like this. However, he did not say anything and took the opportunity to roughly size up the mercenaries. Finally, he glanced at the two men and two women who were sitting by the bonfire and staring at them. Not only was the leader stunned, but the surrounding mercenaries also looked as if they had seen a ghost after hearing their vice leader's words. Yes, it's like this. When we arrived, the one-eyed man was already dead. He was killed by this kid. Vice leader Zheng smiled and looked at the cold-faced young man. So when he asked us to escort them out of the forest, I thought that we were about to go back, so I made the decision to agree. TSK, this kid got lucky. If we hadn't set up so many traps around here, that one-eyed dragon's group wouldn't have been so easily annihilated by us. He, on the other hand, got lucky without doing anything. A mercenary snorted coldly as he glanced at Hao with some displeasure and contempt on his face. In their eyes, wasn't this child taking advantage of them? The person that they had besieged to kill had been injured by the combined efforts of the two captains and escaped. Just like a cooked duck, it had flown away just like that. But fortunately, the things on the one-eyed man's body still fell into the hands of their mercenary group. If this brat dared to take them, they would definitely kill him. All right, since that's the case, let's do as old Zheng says. In any case, our mission here has already been completed, and we are preparing to leave the forest. There's no harm in bringing them along. The leader said as he waved his hand, gesturing for them to stop talking. The few of you, come over here and rest for a while. Vice leader Zheng smiled and waved his hand, gesturing for the few children standing at the side to sit by the bonfire. Pause for a moment, then led Mu Chun and Mu Yu over there. However, just as they were about to sit by the bonfire, a young woman beside them frowned unhappily and said, Sit over there, don't dirty me. Chapter 45:23. The children had lived in the forest for so many days, so it was naturally impossible for them to keep their clothes clean. Moreover, they were small in stature. Their boots stepped in the mud, and their clothes were scratched by leaves and weeds. They were more or less stained with mud and grass juices and the like. In addition, they had followed the one-eyed man's group for a whole day without stopping to rest, so there were some traces of dust on their little faces. However, they were not dirty and smelly. After all, before this, they would still find a water source to clean themselves. At this time, Hauer and Mu Chen's eyes turned cold, and Yer blinked at the woman as if she did not understand what she was saying. 17 glared at the woman with some anger, and her hands secretly clenched into fists. Seeing this, Deputy Zheng was stunned for a moment, but he smiled. "Come over here and sit with me." Then, he said to the young men and women, "Going out naturally can't be compared to staying at home. Moreover, they're only children." "Oomph." The woman snorted and looked at the group. "I didn't know that you could take on other people's missions while taking on our mission. Haha, these two things have no conflict. Moreover, we have completed half of your mission. As long as we escort you out of this forest, it will be considered complete." The regiment commander smiled and looked at the young men and women, saying, "Moreover, as you can see, they are indeed just a few children. Which family doesn't have a few children? If their own children were to go to such a dangerous place, they would also be worried. Taking them out in passing is not a big deal." Hearing the leader's words and seeing that the surrounding mercenaries were looking at her with some displeasure, the woman bit her lip and said no more with a cold face. Seeing this, the young man at the side tried to smooth things over. He smiled and said, "At that time, we found your Iron Tiger mercenary group because we knew that you were famous for being righteous in the Mercenary Association. This trip also confirmed the rumors outside. If it were not for you risking your life several times to protect us, I reckon that we would not have completed the mission so quickly this time." He paused and smiled. He looked at Hao and the others and said, "It's these children's fortune to have met you." "Haha, young Master Liang's words are too serious." The commander smiled and said politely, "This night, Hao and others followed the mercenaries to rest. Until the next morning, when everyone woke up and prepared to set out, you also woke up." Rubbing her belly, she said, "Big brother, I want to relieve myself. I'll go with you." Hao stood up, took her hand, and was about to leave when a woman's voice sounded. "I'm also going to relieve myself. Why don't you let me bring her along? After all, she's a little girl. Even if you're her brother, it's not convenient for you to follow her." The woman from last night stood up and fixed her hair as she looked at Hao and Muyu. "No need," Hao said coldly. You little boy, are you still angry about what happened last night?" The woman chuckled as she looked at him and said, "Although what I did last night wasn't right, it's already been a night. Why are you still holding on to it?" Chapter 45:24. That woman bent her waist and asked while looking at Muyu with a sweet smile. Muyu blinked her pure and innocent big eyes, and after looking at that woman, she sweetly said to Hao, "Big brother, you will go with this big sister. We will come back in a moment." Hearing this, Hao pursed his lips, paused for a moment, then said, "And go. Don't go too far." And Yer nodded her head with a smile. Then looking at that woman, she revealed a pure and harmless smile. "Big sister, let's go." "Okay." After saying few words to several people beside her, that woman led Yer to the underbrush. Others were preparing to set out after organizing the troops. Not long after, one big and one small figure came back, making the commander, Vice Commander Zheng, and others somewhat surprised. That young woman had a face full of disgust for that little girl last night, but today she took that little girl to relieve herself. And when she came back, she had a face full of smiles. Could it be that women were really so fickle? Seeing them return to the troops, the commander instructed, "Okay, let's go. From here to the outside of the forest, if there are no other accidents, it will take at least 3 days, so let's hurry up." A group of people set out again. Those few young men and women were protected in the middle of the troops. And originally Hao and others were also called to the middle by Vice Commander Zheng. But Hao tactfully refused with the reason that his sister-in-law was still young and their speed was not fast. So they gradually fell behind and followed behind the troops. Looking at those few children who fell behind, a touch of coldness flashed through the eyes of that woman in front, and her lips revealed a malicious smile. But that smile disappeared in a flash, so fast that people were unable to perceive it. You went with that woman over there. She didn't do anything, right?" Hao lowered his voice and asked. Ewer looked ahead with a smile, as if she had found something fun, then said in a low voice, "Big brother, that big sister is a bad person. She quietly sprinkled medicinal powder on you, thinking that you didn't discover it. He, but you discovered it. Isn't you very smart?" Her little face was full of smiles, raising a proud smile. Her beautiful eyes curved into crescents because of her smile, looking very cute and likable. However, when Mu Chun and 17 heard her words, the three people's faces changed. Just as they were about to ask, they saw her use a finger to her pink little mouth. Making a shushing gesture, her beautiful eyes flashed cunningly, like a naughty little fox. She whispered to them, "You who took advantage of her peeing. When she was relieving herself, I stole her medicine and sprinkled it on her body when she wasn't paying attention." Hearing this, the three of them were stunned for a moment as if they didn't believe it. However, in a moment of urgency, Howard quickly took a step back and sized her up. Taking advantage of the fact that the people in front of them weren't paying attention to them, he leaned forward and sniffed her body. "You and you use you a brother. What use will it be?" Chapter 45:25. How? Or help me you take off her clothes and put on a new one. Luckily, that woman had only sprinkled the medicine on her outer clothes. After changing her outer clothes, the smell on her body disappeared. It was still the same pink dress, but the one she changed out of wasn't washed, so it was a little dirty. However, it looked about the same as before. If one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't notice that it was a new one. Howard held her hand and said in a low voice, "That's beast powder. The smell isn't obvious, but if beasts smell it, they will go crazy." He had seen this kind of thing once before. It was a very low-grade medicinal powder. Only people with impure thoughts would prepare such things to harm others. That woman was indeed not a good person. Thinking about how Ewer had sprinkled medicine on that woman, he pursed his lips. At that time, he would see how she would reap the consequences of her own actions. When it was close to noon, the leader in front waved his hand and turned back. "Everyone, take a rest here first." However, just as he finished speaking, he heard the roar of beasts accompanied by the sound of running from not far away. Instantly, he quickly shouted, "Alert!" Howard and 17 protected the two younger ones as they followed the mercenaries. They only felt the ground trembling slightly because of the running beasts. They looked around and saw 7 to 8 huge, ferocious beasts roaring and charging towards them. On the other side, there were more than 10 black dog beasts that were about half the height of a person howling and running towards them. It was as if they were stimulated by the smell in the air. They actually didn't fear the other ferocious beasts in the surroundings. Instead, they pounced forward and scuttled into the mercenaries. "Be careful! Damn it! Why are there so many ferocious beasts?" The mercenaries were caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the ferocious beasts, especially since these ferocious beasts were not weak, and there were quite a number of them. Other than the 7 to 8 huge, ferocious beasts, the 10 or so fast ferocious dog beasts were also very troublesome. After all, they were a mercenary group that had experienced hundreds of battles. After being stunned, they quickly reacted and attacked. On one hand, they protected the few young men and women as they retreated. At the same time, they also protected Howard and the rest as they retreated. However, Howard protected his sister-in-law and tried his best to keep a distance from those young men and women. As they retreated to the side. At this moment, the mercenaries gradually realized that something wasn't right because the ferocious beasts and hounds were roaring and pouncing towards the young men and women. It was as if they had locked onto them and would only attack them. Unfortunately, they were protected by the mercenaries in the middle, and the ferocious beasts and hounds were unable to break through the mercenaries' defensive circle for a while. Of course, there were always accidents. As the chaotic battle escalated, the smell of the ferocious beasts' blood stimulated the beasts, causing them to become more and more frenzied. Suddenly, a black dog rushed forward, opened its mouth and bit the young woman's calf, then pulled her back. "Ah, no! Save her! Save her!" For a moment, Seeing the woman being dragged out, the young men and women all cried out in alarm. They wanted to rush forward to save her, but they were scared off by the fierce beasts that pounced on them. Chapter 45:26. But in the next moment, when they saw the canine beast pouncing on the woman with its front paws, while its lower body made a harmonious movement, they were all stunned. What was going on? Ah, help! Help me! The woman's shrill scream pulled them back from their shock. They saw the canine beast's sharp claws deeply piercing the woman's shoulder and pinning her to the ground with a crazed look as if it had eaten ecstasy. But in the blink of an eye, the canine beast was knocked away by a giant, ferocious beast. That giant, ferocious beast pressed forward and tore the woman's outer clothes to pieces with its claws, leaving only her blood-stained inner clothes. But because her outer clothes were torn apart and flying to the side, the beasts quickly pounced on it and tore it open, giving the mercenaries a chance to save her. However, Mu Chun, 17, and Yura looked at this scene with some astonishment. But compared to the astonishment of the three, Yura was more curious and innocent. Howard retracted his gaze and looked at Yura, asking, Yura, did you really only sprinkle her medicine? Yura lowered her head, and her left and right index fingers lightly poked each other. Finally, she raised her head, and blinking her pair of innocent and pure big eyes, she said in a low voice, Actually, I also sprinkled some other things on her. How? Ur's mouth twitched when he heard this. Then he knew what she had sprinkled on the woman. One must know that in their space, there were not only elixirs and medicines given by Mother, but also some self-defense medicine. But there were a few that he had instructed not to use carelessly. He did not expect Ur to use them on that woman. Could it be that those beasts had gone crazy? Brother, did I do something wrong? Ur bit her lip and asked softly. Ur patted her head and said, It is impolite not to reciprocate. Ur did very well. Ur's eyes lit up when she heard this, and her small face lit up with a happy smile. Muchin heard this and very much agreed with it. It was impolite not to reciprocate. That woman dared to plot against his sister. How could he not let her down if he did not teach her a lesson? On the other hand, the corners of 17's mouth twitched as she revealed an as expected expression. He knew that young Master How would definitely say something. Although that woman was a little pitiful, who asked her to scheme against Missu? After all, Missu had 2 older brothers. Although these 2 brothers were a little young, one was more powerful than the other. Neither of them was easy to deal with. Quick, retreat, the leader of the mercenary group shouted. After saving the people, he quickly retreated with his men. Hearing their voices, Howard and the others looked at each other and quickly followed them out of the area. The group of people hurriedly retreated until they reached a safe place. Only then did they breathe a sigh of relief. At this moment, the woman who had been rescued was pale, and the wounds on her body were shocking. Blood was still seeping out from those wounds, and her white inner clothes had long been dyed red. Her lips were trembling slightly, as if she was afraid, and also as if she was shocked. It was as if she had not recovered from her shock, and one of her hands was still clutching her clothes tightly. Chapter 45:27. Those ferocious beasts specifically pounced on her. When her clothes were torn off, those ferocious beasts pounced on her clothes. Seeing that scene, if she didn't react, then she would really be a fool. But just a 4-year-old child, could it be that she really dared to have such thoughts? Why are you scolding my sister? Howard coldly shouted back, his cold little face sunk. The 3 young men and women who were helping her apply medicine and put on her clothes were slightly startled when they saw this. They looked at the children and were about to speak when they heard her murderous voice. Cousin, kill that little girl for me. Kill her. The woman hatefully said, her gaze fixed on the innocent face of Ur. Ur blinked her eyes innocently and looked at the woman with a bit of grievance in her soft voice. Big sister, why are you scolding me? Why? I'm like this, isn't it because of you? The woman gasped for breath. In her agitation, the wounds on her body seeped out again. Those mercenaries looked at them and couldn't help but frown. The mercenary leader looked at both sides and asked in a deep voice, "What's going on?" Then, his gaze fell on Yor. "Little girl, you tell us." And Muchin listened, but didn't have the intention to stop Yor from speaking. They just quietly stood by her side. Yor played with her fingers and with her pair of beautiful big eyes. She glanced at that woman whose body was full of injuries, and her soft voice carried a bit of innocence and naivety. "That big sister took me to relieve myself, then sprinkled something on my body, so I learned from her, and also sprinkled something on her body." Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but be startled. They looked at her with a complicated gaze and frowned again. Looking at the injured woman, they asked, "Is what she said true? What kind of powder did you sprinkle on this little girl?" "She's talking nonsense." There was a moment of panic in the woman's eyes, followed by anger. "If I really sprinkled something on her, would she be standing there well? The one being attacked by the ferocious beast now is me, not her. That's because I noticed the smell of beast powder on my sister's body, so I asked her to change her clothes." Howard said coldly. He stared at the woman and said, "There's a saying that goes, if you hurt someone, you hurt yourself. Who do you want to blame?" What a vicious child. The young man who hadn't spoken until now shouted coldly, and his gaze carried a wisp of killing intent as he stared at Howard and the others. "We didn't make a fuss about the mercenaries bringing all of you along, but all of you intended to kill my cousin. Vicious children like you will only be a scourge if you live." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure suddenly flashed forward, and a cold light flashed past. Piercingly cold sword chi carried a murderous aura as it suddenly attacked towards Hao and the others. "Be careful," Deputy Commander Zheng shouted in a low voice. He shot forward like an arrow and arrived in front of Hao and the others, blocking the attack for them. Bang! That sword chi landed on Deputy Commander Zheng's sword, and the air current and the blade collided, making a muffled sound. No one saw that Hao who was standing in front of Mu Chun and Mu Yu, moved his hand slightly at that moment. If it wasn't for Deputy Commander Zheng standing in front of them, he would have taken action himself. Chapter 45-28. If Miss Lin didn't have bad intentions towards that little girl first, how could she have ended up in this state? Deputy Commander Zheng calmly glanced at the pale-faced girl and said, "Miss Lin, that little girl is only 3 or 4 years old. How could she know about drugging? If you didn't drug her first, she wouldn't have learned from you. Speaking of which, the root of the problem is still you." Finished speaking, he turned around and looked towards you who had an innocent face. With a stern face, he somewhat helplessly said, "Little girl, you are still young. You should learn some good things and not learn bad things. Just like today's matter, you also did wrong. If you knew that she had drugged you, you should have come and told me." "Oh, your nose." She nodded with an innocent and harmless appearance. At this time, the commander looked at both sides and said in a deep voice, "We are still in the forest. I hope that this kind of thing won't happen again in the next few days." After saying this, he said to the man surnamed Liang, "Young Master Liang, help Miss Lin treat and bandage her wounds first." He then asked a few mercenaries to take out a stretcher. After they bandaged the wounds, he asked them to carry the girl away. The group in front walked quickly. At the back, Deputy Commander Zheng slowed down and walked beside Hao and the others. He said, "What you did was really unwise. They're the children of aristocratic families and have a big family behind them. If you become enemies with them here, it's hard to guarantee that they won't make things difficult for you outside." Howard didn't reply. Instead, his eyes flashed and he asked, "Deputy Commander Zheng, why are most of the mercenaries in the Foundation establishment realm?" Deputy Commander Zheng didn't expect him to ask this question. After being startled for a moment, he smiled and said, "Otherwise, do you think that everyone can be like me and the commander with a golden core realm cultivation?" As he spoke, he let out a low chuckle. His voice carried a hint of carefreeness as he said, "Do you know why our mercenary group is one of the best in the Mercenary Association, even though we don't have the most members?" Howard shook his head and didn't say anything. "That's because the commander and I are both Golden Core Realm cultivators. For other mercenary groups, Having one golden core realm cultivator is already very strong. He laughed out loud, and his tone was filled with pride. It's precisely because we have 2 golden core cultivators in our mercenary team that no one dares to provoke us. The completion rate of our missions is also extremely high. Er's heart slightly moved. He asked, Golden core realm cultivators are very strong? Isn't there someone stronger? Haha, you're still young. You don't know how many years it takes to cultivate to the golden core stage. Even the leader and I cultivated for nearly 100 years before we reached the golden core stage. As for those above the golden core stage, there are naturally those, but only the ancestors of some big aristocratic families or sects will appear. Ordinary people will at most reach the golden core stage in their lifetime. It is very difficult for them to break through. He sighed softly. As he walked, he looked at the sky and said, I once heard that in the other heaven realms there are many experts above the gold core realm. Some of them are even existences that we don't even dare to think about. Chapter 45:29. Thinking of his own strength and the snow wolf by his side, his heart calmed down a little. At least, even if they really encounter danger, he would be able to protect his younger siblings. Then can't we go to the other regions of the heaven realm? He asked again. How can it be so easy? However, I heard that there will be people from the upper realm coming down to the floating margin sect every 3 years to select good seedlings and bring them to the sect. However, there are very few who can be selected. Hearing this, Er's eyes lit up and he glanced at his younger siblings. If that was the case, then the people in the floating margin sect must know how to go to the upper realm or contact people from the upper realm. Along the way, they chatted as they walked, and Hauer intentionally or unintentionally inquired about information. When Deputy Commander Zheng heard his question, he felt a little strange in his heart, but he didn't think too much about it. After all, this was information that could be casually obtained outside and wasn't considered a secret. However, he was a little curious. Why was this child so interested in these things? When night fell, the group stopped to rest. Those few young men and women stared at and the others from time to time, but they didn't play any tricks. Instead, some mercenaries surrounded and Muyu and played with them. Hey, little girl, you're called A mercenary grinned and looked at who was holding a piece of meat in her hand and biting it. Glanced at him and nodded with a smile. Yes, I'm called Uncle can also call me why are you here? Where is your home? Do you know what your father's name is? Another mercenary asked. Bit the meat, and, as if a small squirrel chewing, her pair of beautiful eyes blinked while looking at them. After she swallowed the meat in her mouth, she softly said, Big brother said, when eating, don't talk to other people. After speaking, she continued to hold the meat wrapped in leaves and continued to chew. When the surrounding mercenaries heard this, they were stunned for a moment. Then, they laughed and didn't ask any more questions. However, pairs of eyes were still looking at the 3 children. She didn't know when she hadn't interacted with them before, but after interacting with them for a day, she realized that these 3 children seemed to have become spirits. Even if she wanted to get anything out of them, it seemed that she couldn't get anything out of them. The next few days were peaceful until one day, under the guidance of the mercenaries, the group finally left the forest and saw the flat road outside. He's out. Deputy Commander Zheng smiled and looked at Hauer and the others, asking, What do you plan to do next? Are you coming with us to the city or going home? Hauer thought about it and said, We'll follow you all into the city. All right, we'll take you with us on our swords. We'll arrive around noon. Vice Regiment Commander Zheng said with a smile. After exchanging a few words with the regiment commander, the entire group flew on their swords and headed towards the city. Around noon, they arrived at the city gate. They put away their flying swords and landed on ground. The young men and women said their goodbyes and left quickly after taking a deep look at the children. Chapter 45:30. Hauer nodded. I know, then I'll leave first. He glanced at the children and told them to be careful. Then he sighed and left. Young Master Hao, Are we going to the city? Or should we find another place to stay? 17 asked. Howard looked at the city gate in front of them and said, I've seen it all along the way. Other than this town, there are no other towns. There are only one or two small villages. Even if we want to leave for another town, we have to pass through here. He paused and thought for a moment before saying, 17, find a quiet courtyard after we enter the city. We won't stay in an inn. We'll rent a courtyard. Yes, 17 responded and followed the three of them into the city. After sending them to a restaurant to eat, she quickly went to make arrangements. On the other side, in the Lin family's hall in the city, the girl surnamed Lin threw herself into her mother's arms and cried. She roughly told her parents what had happened. Your injuries were actually caused by a child? Patriarch Lin frowned with a gloomy face. Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? A 4-year-old child plotted against you? The girl sobbed softly and said, I didn't expect that little girl to be so vicious. She actually poured medicine on me. If those mercenaries hadn't saved me in time, I'm afraid I would have died under the claws of those ferocious beasts. Damn it! Patriarch Lin shouted angrily and slammed his hand on the table. Where did these wild children come from? How dare they bully our Lin family? He scolded angrily and asked in a deep voice with a frown, Where are they now? Are they also in the city? They followed us back. They should have also entered the city. The girl sobbed softly and said, Father, you must capture those children. I want to teach them a lesson and vent my anger. After hearing his daughter's words, Master Lin asked the other 3 people who were with her. Although there were some discrepancies between what his daughter had said and what she had said, it was a fact that his daughter had suffered a loss at the hands of those children. Thus, he immediately sent people to the city to look for those children. If they saw those children, they were to capture them and bring them back. On the other side, Hao and the others were eating in a restaurant. They bought some pastries and stored them in the space to bring them back. They borrowed the restaurant owner's backyard and took a hot bath. After changing their clothes, they sat in the front and waited for 17 to come back. Even in a restaurant, the 3 of them were exceptionally eye-catching. However, many people saw that the 3 children had extraordinary temperaments and thought that they should be the children of aristocratic families. They only looked at them for a while before withdrawing their gazes. Big brother, 17 has returned. Seeing 17 walking towards them on the street, Yu happily smiled. Hao and Mu Chun looked down and knew that he had found the courtyard. Not long after, 17 came up, bowed to them, and said, Young Master Hao, the arrangements have been made. Hao nodded. After paying the bill, he left with his sister-in-law and followed 17. Those children are really outstanding. One look, and you can tell that they must be the children of aristocratic families. But the strength of that guard doesn't seem to be much. He doesn't look like a guard of an aristocratic family. Chapter 45-31. The sounds of discussion in the restaurant came to a halt as everyone sized up the 2 men, but no one spoke. Seeing this, the 2 guards took out a piece of silver and threw it to the waiter, asking, What do the children look like? Where do they go? The waiter took the silver and grinned, saying, It's a pair of identical twins about 3 or 4 years old. They also have an older brother, about 10 years old. There's also a guard in black, but he has already left, heading in that direction. As for where exactly he went, this little one doesn't know. Seeing this, the 2 guards looked at each other and turned to look in the direction the waiter pointed. Seeing that they had left, the guests in the restaurant glanced at the waiter and said, We don't know who they are, but they casually revealed the whereabouts of the children. If those 2 guards want to find trouble with the children, you have sinned. What can happen? Those children don't look like ordinary people. Besides, those 2 guards just now had the Lin family's waist tag on their waists. One look, and you can tell that they are the Lin family's guards. What can they do to the children? The waiter said disapprovingly. Seeing this, the people in the restaurant did not say anything more. The Lin family was a big family in this city. They should not find trouble with the children. On the other side, 17 led Hao and the others to the courtyard they had just rented. Once inside, 17 said to them, I found someone to ask about renting a house. The landlord recommended a few courtyards. I want to take a look and finally chose this one. 17 looked at the courtyard and said, "The city lord's mansion is just one street to the east of this courtyard, so no one dares to cause trouble in this area. The environment is also relatively good. Although the courtyard is not big and the rent is more expensive than the others, in the end, I feel that this courtyard is more suitable for us." "Yes, it's very good here." Howard nodded and looked at Mu Chun and Mu Yu, saying, "We will settle down here first and find out some information about this area. After we are familiar with it, we will make plans. During this time, the two of you should not run out, in case you meet with danger, understand?" "Yes, big brother, don't worry, we know," the two little guys said obediently. "Let's rest for today. From tomorrow onwards, 17, you go out and gather information. Also," Howard's voice paused. He glanced at the courtyard and said, "Set up a formation later. The three of you should familiarize yourselves with it, so that you don't get lost in the formation." "Okay." The three of them answered and walked inside to familiarize themselves with the structure of the courtyard. The guards of the Lin family split up to find out. It was not until night fell that they found out that the children had rented a courtyard and had already moved in. Thus, they returned to the mansion to report. In the Lin family patriarch's face darkened when he heard the guard's report. He looked at the guard below unhappily and said, "Didn't I tell you to capture him directly? Don't tell me you can't go in after renting the courtyard?" Hearing this, the guard hurriedly replied, "Yes, your subordinate will go and capture him now." After saying that, he quickly retreated. Chapter 45-32. 17. Go and rest. Hao stood in the yard and said to 17, who was standing guard, "Young Master Hao, I'll keep watch. You go and sleep first." 17 said, but did not leave. Hao shook his head and said, "It's useless for you to keep watch here. You're too weak. Even if someone comes, you won't be able to defeat them. Why don't you go and rest first and recover your energy to do other things?" Hearing this, 17 pursed her lips and finally replied, "Yes." She took 2 steps and stopped to ask, "Young Master Hao, will someone really sneak in tonight? Would those youngsters really not let go of this matter?" "It doesn't matter if there is or not." Howard said, "Go. You don't have to worry here." Seeing this, 17 walked towards his room. There were only 2 courtyards in the front yard and the backyard. The front yard was the living room, and there were 3 rooms in the backyard. Mu Chun and Mu Yu were still young and were used to sleeping in one room. Howard had one room for himself, and the other room was given to 17. Howard sat cross-legged in front of Mu Chun and Mu Yu's room and closed his eyes to cultivate. At the same time, he released his divine sense to cover the whole yard as the night deepened. The 4 guards quietly came to the door of the small yard. Looking at the tightly shut door, they looked at each other and jumped up to go into the yard. The yard was quiet and there was no sound at all. It was pitch black all around. They walked along the path of the front yard and prepared to go to the backyard. Unexpectedly, they circled around the front yard for a long time and still could not get out of the front yard. "What's going on? Why do we keep circling around here?" One of the guards was a little frightened and asked in a low voice. "Oh no, I'm afraid there's a formation here." Another guard said, "Didn't they say there were only 3 children and a guard who had just drawn chi into his body not long ago? How do they know how to set up a formation?" Another person asked in astonishment, "We can't get out of this formation. Let's retreat first and go back to report to the master." Thus, they circled around a few times before retreating back to the Lin family to report. "What? There's a formation in that yard? Are you sure?" When Patriarch Lin heard their report, his brows immediately furrowed. He walked in the hall with his hands behind his back. He looked at his daughter and asked, "Didn't you say that there were only 3 children and a guard with mediocre strength? How do they know how to set up a race?" This daughter doesn't know. They've been following the mercenaries all this time, and they haven't shown anything. The woman hurriedly said, "Patriarch, I'll go take a look." A man in his 30s walked out with a confident look on his face. He said, "I know a little about formations. Breaking a maze formation won't be a problem. In go. I don't care what method you use, but you must capture those brats for me. Patriarch Lin ordered in a deep voice. Thus, a few guards, along with a man in his 30s, went to the small courtyard again. Howard, who was sitting cross-legged in front of the door, had already noticed when those people stepped into the courtyard for the second time. He slowly opened his eyes, and a murderous look appeared in his cold gaze. He stood up and quietly walked to the front yard. Chapter 45:33. Therefore, he did not directly kill them. Instead, he released the aura of his golden elixir cultivation and enveloped them. Puff! 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 Almost at the same time the pressure was released, the people in the array spat out mouthfuls of blood and fell to their knees. Who is it? The man in his 30s asked in shock. His eyes were full of fear. Get lost. A cold voice rang out in the air and struck the people's minds. They hugged their heads and cried out in pain. At the same time, they were sent flying by a gust of wind and were swept out of the courtyard. Hiss! The sound of gasping was accompanied by screams. The people looked at the small courtyard in shock. Their faces were pale, and they quickly scrambled away. How? Pursed his lips and stood in the courtyard. He looked at the night sky and finally turned back to rest. He showed his strength to let them think that even though they were just a few children, there was a strong person protecting them in the dark. They would not dare to have any ideas about them. This way, they would be able to prevent future trouble. If the Lin family knew what was good for them, they would not dare to come again after this incident. At this moment, in the Lin family, Patriarch Lin silently looked at the few people in the hall. After listening to their words, his face became dignified. It seems that there's a strong person protecting those children in the dark. We can't touch them. Father, are we just going to let it go like this? The girl asked unwillingly. What else can we do? He looked at her with a sullen face and a displeased look in his eyes. If not for you, how could we have offended an unknown strong person? With such a strong person protecting them in the dark, how could those children be ordinary children like you said? After scolding his daughter, he looked at the people in the hall and said, Tomorrow, prepare a gift and go to the small courtyard to apologize. At the same time, find out more about them. Patriarch, do you still want us to go? The man was a little frightened. Because of what happened tonight, he was terrified and did not dare to go to the small courtyard again. Do you want me to go? He snorted heavily and strode out with his hands behind his back. The next day, 17 went out early in the morning to buy breakfast. When he arrived at the entrance of the courtyard, he saw a few people pacing back and forth in front of the door. Seeing this, he stepped forward and asked, What are you doing here? Seeing 17 in black, those people hurriedly retreated. The man in the lead revealed a smile and said, Little brother, we are from the Lin clan. We are here to apologize. We have offended you before. Please forgive us. This is a token of our sincerity. Please accept it. 17 didn't take it, and she just glanced at them and said, We don't know the Lin clan, and we don't know all of you as well. Don't wander around here. As he spoke, he walked past them and entered the courtyard, closing the door behind him. The people outside the door looked at each other. One of them asked, What do we do now? What can we do? Of course we're going back. Don't tell me you dare to barge in, the man said angrily. After stuffing the things he was carrying into the hands of the guard, he turned around and left in large strides. At around 7 in the morning, the children got out of bed. After washing up, they sat in the courtyard and prepared to eat breakfast. 17 then told them about what happened in the morning. I just want to take a look. They have already left. Chapter 45:34. Thus, after eating breakfast, 17 also went out to inquire for information. As for after instructing the two little ones to cultivate by themselves, he prepared to return to his room to cultivate. However, just when he was about to return to his room, his sleeve was pulled by Big brother. Raised her delicate little face and looked at him. What's the matter, Howard asked and turned around. Is there something you don't understand about cultivation? What do you not understand? Big brother will tell you. Shook her head and looked at him. No, Big brother, you wants to learn herbs. After she tried to use medicine to deal with people, she wanted to learn about herbs. Perhaps she could also be like her mother and be able to make those powerful medicine and pills? How was startled and somewhat disagreed. You're still too young now. It will be very difficult for you to understand the knowledge of herbs. Moreover, you have to try it out on the side to familiarize yourself quickly. You should learn swordsmanship first. But you want to learn herbs. She whispered and pulled his sleeve. Big brother, you will also work hard to learn swordsmanship. But can you spare some time to learn herbs every day? Muchin saw this and also opened his mouth. Big brother, if you wants to learn, then let her learn. She will learn the things she is interested in very quickly. Seeing this, thought of their mother and looked at Yor again. Finally, he nodded. All right. However, you can't fall behind in your cultivation. Those are the skills you can use to protect yourself. As for medicine, when you see father and mother in the future, let mother teach you. Only then will you understand how to use those things. And Yor happily nodded and asked with a smile, Big brother, then should we go out to buy books on herbs? Howard smiled and said, No need. I have a book here that mother showed me. He took out a thick book from the space and handed it to her. He didn't forget to remind her. Yor, this is mother's book. You have to take care of it carefully. Don't spoil or dirty it. And Yor will definitely take good care of mother's book. She nodded, her little face full of seriousness and solemnity. Her little hands tightly hugged the thick book to her chest. This was her mother's book. Mother, when will I be able to see mother? In another world, Feng Jiu seemed to feel something. He held Xin Yuan Mo's hand and smiled. I think the children must be missing me. Xin Yuan Mo's was slightly startled. He glanced at her, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Those three little guys, there's no one around to take care of them. I don't know how mischievous they will be. Hao and Shun have always been obedient and self-disciplined. But that girl, I'm really worried that she will cause trouble everywhere. Feng Jiu helplessly shook his head and sighed. I really want to find them sooner. I will. Xin Yuan Mo's tightly held her hand and said. Suddenly, his slow pace stopped. His expression slightly changed, especially after he felt the surging spiritual energy in his body. Feng Jiu, who was beside him, felt the change of spiritual energy in his body. After being startled, she said with some surprise, You shouldn't be advancing, right? I think so, Xin Yuan Mo's said, while suppressing the surging spiritual energy in his body. This world can't bear my advancement. Chapter 45-35. During this period of time, due to the disappearance of the three children, Feng Jiu had been uneasy and could not calm down to refine elixirs. Even when he said that he would find time to refine elixirs in case of an emergency, he did not stop to refine elixirs. This time, Xin Yuan Mo's advancement came so suddenly that the two of them were caught off guard. With his strength, the mortal realm would not be able to withstand his breakthrough. Therefore, the two of them could only quickly fly through the void and return to the floating island in the heaven realm, where their mental energy covered the entire area. This place floated in the sky and was surrounded by a defensive boundary. It was also the place where the people that Feng Jiu had subdued lived. It was the safest place to advance. At this time, Xin Yuan Mo's was sitting cross-legged on the peak of a mountain on the floating island that reached into the clouds. His body was surrounded by a powerful and intimidating spiritual aura and ancient pressure. No one on the floating island dared to come close to him within 100 miles. Feng Jiu stood 100 meters away and watched. His brows were slightly furrowed and his eyes were filled with worry. He was extremely anxious. The strength of a supreme being was the highest level that she knew of. It was a rare existence among immortal cultivators in the world. However, when one advanced to such a level, there was a high chance of death and it was extremely dangerous. They originally thought that the strength of a supreme being would not be so easy to reach, but they did not expect that it would come so suddenly when they were not prepared. At that critical moment, she only had time to give him all the elixirs that could be of use. However, she was still worried that those elixirs would not be able to withstand his advancement this time. Xianyuan Mose felt the spiritual aura in his body surging violently. He could no longer suppress it and choose another time to advance. Therefore, while guiding the spiritual aura in his body, he opened his eyes and looked at Fengjiu, who was 100 meters away. "Aju, don't worry. There have been no accidents in the past. This time, there won't be any accidents." Xianyuan Mose comforted her. He looked at her and said, "I don't think my advancement will be over in a short period of time. You don't have to stay here. No one can help me at this stage. Go do your thing." "What are you talking about?" Fengjiu snapped. "Just focus on breaking through. Don't think about anything else. I'll stay here and watch you break through until I see you succeed." Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose's lips moved slightly. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He only curled his lips slightly, revealing a faint smile. "All right." He slowly closed his eyes and discarded the distracting thoughts in his mind, focusing on advancing. Boom! Crack! In the sky, rumbling sounds like muffled thunder resounded in the clouds. Streaks of lightning streaked across the sky, and a loud crack sounded. It was as if it directly struck people's hearts, causing their hearts to fiercely jump, and they faintly felt somewhat uneasy. Boom! Crack! The sound of thunder and lightning resounded above their heads. The sound shook the entire sky. The loud sound of thunder and lightning even reached the clouds and reverberated in the depths of the sky for a long time. Chapter 45-36. Fengjiu narrowed her eyes and looked at the sky above Xianyuan Mose, who was sitting cross-legged. Over there, a whole patch of dark clouds was gathering. From the size of the top of his head, it gradually spread outwards, turning the sky into a dense patch of dark clouds. The sun's rays were blocked. The sky, which was originally shining brightly, turned into dusk in the blink of an eye. The entire world was enveloped by this dusk, and the atmosphere was so oppressive that it made it hard for people to breathe. Fengjiu's hands trembled slightly. Her body was a little tense, and her heart was in her throat. To reach the peak of the godly king realm, she had experienced countless breakthroughs and heavenly lightning tempering. However, she had never seen anything like this. Whether it was the change in the sky or the unprecedented spiritual energy on Moses' body, they all made her feel a sense of unease and fear that she had never felt before. For those who had reached the strength stage like them, there were many times when they would have a faint premonition in their hearts the moment something bad happened. And at this moment, it was exactly like that. She took a deep breath and suppressed her uneasy emotions. She clenched her trembling hands and looked at the figure sitting cross-legged with closed eyes. She had gone through so many breakthroughs in the past without any accidents. This time, it shouldn't be the same. Perhaps she was only feeling uneasy because her children were not by her side, and she had not been able to prepare the pills needed for her breakthroughs in advance. What she did not know was that when Xianyuan Mose released his aura and spiritual energy, and when the muffled sound of thunder and lightning rang out in the sky, Tianjizi, who was far away in another world, opened his eyes almost instantly and looked towards the sky. Sitting cross-legged on the peak of Heaven Mountain, he looked at the gradually darkening sky. His brows were slightly furrowed, and he reached out his hand to make a divination. However, after a long time, he was unable to divine the heavenly secrets that he wanted to know. His slightly furrowed brows were also unable to loosen for a long time. The other sovereigns of the heaven realm only heard the sound of thunder. Some of them didn't even know what was going on. Some of them were puzzled and looked towards the direction of the celestial phenomenon. Fengjiu thought that Xianyuan Mose's first bolt of lightning would strike quickly, but he didn't expect that after he had been sitting cross-legged on the mountain peak for 3 days, the first bolt of lightning would strike from the sky with a boom. The lightning struck precisely where he was sitting cross-legged. However, when the heavenly lightning struck, it was blocked by the defensive airflow formed by the spiritual aura condensed and surging on his body. Most of the power was neutralized, and only a small amount of lightning power struck his body. She involuntarily let out a sigh of relief when she saw this scene. Her anxious heart also relaxed slightly. If this was the case, he should be fine. Even if the advancement this time was extremely difficult, he should be able to endure it. Unexpectedly, just as she heaved a sigh of relief, a soft sigh suddenly entered her ears. Alas, who is it? She turned her head almost instantly and shouted. Her cold gaze contained pressure as it swept towards the direction of the voice. Wherever her gaze passed, an ancient pressure suddenly appeared. It's me. Chapter 45-37. Senior. Fengjiu was slightly surprised. Her eyes were filled with undisguised surprise and astonishment. As far as she knew, this divine predictor rarely left Sky Mountain. Back then, even when Imo-chan met with an accident and disappeared from the world, he did not appear. So why was he here now? Faintly, she smelled a trace of something unusual. At the same time, her heart, which had just relaxed, was once again raised because of his arrival. The divine predictor slowly came over on his immortal instrument. When his wise and old eyes fell on Xinyuan Mo's, a trace of pity flashed across his eyes. Looking at the dusky sky without any sunlight, he sighed softly in his heart. Senior, why are you here? Is something the matter? Fengjiu asked. She withdrew her aura and looked at the divine predictor. The divine predictor stood beside her and said, I'm here to take a look. After saying this, he did not say anything more. Instead, his eyes fell on Xinyuan Mo's, who was 100 meters away. His expression was unreadable, and no one knew what he was thinking. Fengjiu's eyes moved slightly. She looked at him and asked softly, Senior, will he be able to successfully advance? The divine predictor did not speak. He just stood there quietly and watched. I did not prepare any elixirs for him to advance, and I can't imagine what kind of tempering he will have to endure this time, Fengjiu said faintly. Hearing this, the divine predictor sighed and looked at her. Even if you prepared an elixir, it's useless. Sometimes, it's hard to go against the will of the heavens. Senior, are you saying that he won't be able to pass this stage? Fengjiu frowned slightly. Her heart sank because of his words. What his fate will be in the end will naturally be known in 81 days, the divine predictor said slowly. He didn't look at Fengjiu. Instead, he looked ahead and said, Sometimes it's not that people don't want to live, it's that the heavens don't want to let them live. Immortal cultivation is something that goes against the heavens. Every breakthrough is equivalent to taking a step into hell. It's even more so for Supremes. It's not easy to become Supremes. In the past, it only took 3 bolts of heavenly lightning to break through. Could it be that this time, it will be tempered by 81 bolts of heavenly lightning? Fengjiu's expression changed slightly as he looked at Xinyuan Mo's, who was 100 meters away. Half of the power of the previous lightning had been blocked, and only one strand had landed on his body. However, it had caused his clothes to be slightly charred. If there were 81 bolts, then Tianjizi didn't speak again. He just looked ahead in silence. Fengjiu's face was slightly pale. Looking at the dark sky and the strong air currents and pressure in the air, he only felt an impulse to go forward and stop it. However, at this moment, even if she wanted to stop him, she couldn't stop him from breaking through. Now that he was in the midst of breaking through and enduring the tempering of the heavenly lightning, he only had 2 paths. The first was to successfully break through and pass through this dangerous juncture. The second was to fail, and the consequences of failure, her body trembled slightly. She couldn't imagine the consequences of failure, and she was even more powerless to bear it. Xinyuan Mo's, who was in the midst of the air currents, didn't know anything else. He was only focused on breaking through, guiding the spiritual aura in his body and the terrifying air currents that were surging. Chapter 45-38. This was because she could not bear the consequences of Moses' failure. If he failed, not only would he lose his cultivation base, but he would also lose his life. Perhaps it was because the strange phenomenon in the sky had yet to dissipate, or perhaps it was because the thunder and lightning were still intertwining. Gradually, other sovereigns arrived outside the floating island by following the strange phenomenon and the reverberating sound and the fluctuating airflow. However, because this floating island was Fengjiu's territory, the entire island was suspended in the sky and was protected by a powerful barrier. Even if the sovereigns wanted to enter, they were blocked outside. One of the sovereigns tried to enter the floating island, but he was blocked by the barrier. The airflow from the barrier pushed him out, preventing him from entering. Seeing this, he rubbed his chin and muttered, "The barrier set up by Fengjiu is indeed extraordinary. Even I cannot enter." Actually, it was not that they could not enter. However, if they tried to force their way in, they would definitely break the barrier. They knew that this was Fengjiu's territory, and they were all sovereigns. Naturally, they could not force their way in and become enemies with Fengjiu. Therefore, they could only be blocked outside. They did not know that the divine predictor from Heaven Mountain, an old man who looked simple and unpretentious, but had an ethereal aura, had easily entered this place. Could it be that Fengjiu or Xianyuan Mose is advancing? The sovereigns who had gathered did not leave. Instead, they discussed thoughtfully outside. This is their territory, and they have caused such a huge commotion. It is reasonable to say that they are advancing. However, from what I know, they're both at the peak of the Supreme God stage. If they advance further, they will be at the Supreme God stage. That kind of power is extremely rare. Perhaps it's not them who are advancing. According to what I know, they seem to have been traveling through the mortal world recently. Why would they suddenly return and be in the midst of advancing? Moreover, how long has it been since they became supreme gods? It is impossible for them to advance so quickly. If they weren't advancing, what could have happened? As they spoke, they couldn't help but look at each other. After a long time, one of them said, "Instead of waiting here and not being able to see anything, why don't we go to the Black Tortoise Monarch's place? He has a good relationship with Fengjiu and the others. Perhaps he might know something." "That's a good idea." The others laughed and flew into the sky together. Fengjiu had no idea what was going on outside the floating island, nor did he have the heart to pay attention to it. At this moment, all of her attention and thoughts were focused on Xianyuan Mose, who was advancing. Just as Tianjizi had said, this was not something that could be solved with just 3 heavenly thunders. From a moment Tianjizi appeared until now, more than 4 bolts of lightning had struck Mose's body. For the past few days, there had only been 1 bolt of lightning a day, and each bolt was more terrifying than the last. After only 4 bolts of lightning, Mose, who was sitting at the peak of the mountain, had his robes charred black. His black hair was also disheveled. The 5th bolt of lightning is coming. Fengjiu looked at the sky and muttered. She could not hide the worry in her eyes. Chapter 45-39. As they were talking, a loud rumbling sound came from the sky. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky and struck down fiercely along with a heavenly thunder, da-boom. With a loud sound, Fengjiu, who was 100 meters away, saw the lightning strike accurately on Mose's body. Even though she was standing 100 meters away, she could clearly feel the terrifying power contained in the lightning. She watched as the lightning struck Mose's body. With the naked eye, she could see the blue electric current flowing through his body. As for him, the clothes on his body were burnt. Even the defensive vest inside was shattered by that strike and turned into ashes. The smell of burnt flesh wafted over, causing her face to turn pale. She couldn't help but lift her foot and was about to step forward when Tianjizi reached out and grabbed her wrist. "You can't go." As Tianjizi spoke, he looked ahead with a solemn expression. "The power of this lightning is no small matter. You can't help him." Fengjiu pursed her lips and looked ahead. She silently retracted her foot, and the hands under her sleeves were tightly clenched into fists. The two stood there, and neither of them spoke. As the days passed, Fengjiu didn't move even half a step, as if her feet were nailed to the ground. She watched as Xianyuan Mose endured the lightning strikes day by day. She watched as the wounds from the previous day had not healed, and the next day, the lightning struck again. She watched as the injuries on his body worsened day by day, and even spat out blood, but she was powerless. On the other side, at the floating chance immortal island in the mortal realm, when Howard walked out of the room, he saw Mu Chun and Mu Yu sitting at the stone table in the courtyard in a daze. He didn't know what the two of them were thinking, but they were in a daze and didn't even notice him coming out. Seeing this, he was slightly startled. He walked forward and asked, "Chun, are you or what's wrong?" Hearing his voice, the two little fellows came back to their senses. Before Mu Chun could speak, he saw Yu Er's delicate little face carrying a bit of fear, and her soft voice revealed a bit of helplessness. "Big brother, Yu might die." How Er's heart tightened and his expression changed. "Don't talk nonsense. Why would you say that? It's true." Yu Er's eyes were a little red. She lowered her head and covered her heart with one hand. Yu Er's heart keeps beating. It's beating very fast, as if I'm about to die. Brother too. Brother, are we sick and about to die? Yu Er is so scared. At the end of her sentence, her voice was choked with sobs. She threw herself into Hao Er's arms and hugged him tightly. Hearing this, Hao Er gently patted her back and comforted her. "It's okay. Yu Er, don't be afraid. Nothing will happen." He looked at Mu Chun and asked, "Chun Er, are you the same as Yu Er?" Mu Chun nodded. "Actually, it's not always. It's just that occasionally my heart will beat very fast, and there's a feeling of panic and fear. After a while, I'll recover," but he paused for a moment. "It's already been a few days. It wasn't too serious a few days ago, but if that feeling comes again these 2 days, my heart will beat very fast, and that feeling will be very panicky. It's getting worse and worse." Chapter 45-40. Thus, he looked outside and asked, "Where did 17 go?" "He went to buy food for a while. You should be back soon." Mu Chun said. Howard said, "Then let's go. I'll take you to the medical hall in the city and let the doctor check if there's anything wrong with your bodies." He was also worried about their health, so he wanted to take them to the medical hall in the city. The three of them walked forward and passed through the array in the front yard. When they walked to the door, they saw 17 coming in from outside with a food box in his hand. "Master Hao, Master Chun, miss you. Are you going out?" 17 looked at them in surprise. 17, you're back just in time. Howard stopped and looked at him. "Which medical hall in the city has the best doctor?" "The most famous one in the city is Huichun Hall. Not only are there doctors, but there are also refiners and pharmacists." 17 quickly said and looked at the three of them. "Is anyone feeling unwell? Do you want to call a doctor?" "No need. Let's go directly." Howard said, "Chun and you feel a little unwell. I want to take them there. It's quite a distance from here to Huichun Hall. I'll prepare a carriage." He was about to turn when he remembered the food box in his hand and asked, "Master, miss, do you want to eat something before going out?" "How?" Or thought for a while and looked at Mu Chun and Mu Yu. He went forward and took the food box. "Go prepare the carriage. We'll eat here." He carried the food box and brought the two children back to the small hall in the front yard. He put the food out and said, "Eat a little. I don't know how long it will take." Perhaps the two children were worried and scared, so they didn't eat much. After eating a little, they couldn't eat anymore. Seeing this, Howard also casually ate a few mouthfuls. Not long after, 17 came to report that the carriage was ready. Thus, they sat in the carriage and went to Huichun Hall. As the city's #1 medical hall, Huichun Hall didn't have many customers because not only were the medicines sold expensive, but even the consultation was also very expensive. Ordinary people wouldn't come here unless they had a big problem that other medical halls and doctors couldn't solve. Most of the time, those who appeared in the Huichun Hall, other than those who came for consultation, were people who came to buy medicine or elixirs. When 17 drove the carriage to Huichun Hall, he stopped the horse and said to the three young masters, "Master, miss, Huichun Hall." Howard lifted the curtain and took a look. He saw that the courtyard was empty and there were only 3 to 5 people inside. Thinking about what 17 told him on the way here, he immediately got off the carriage and led Mu Chun and Yu down. 17 stopped the horse carriage at the side and followed behind them into the rejuvenation hall. The pharmacy apprentice saw that the three children had outstanding appearances and that the material of their robes was of the highest quality. Furthermore, they were accompanied by a black-clothed guard. Thus, he approached them with a smile and inquired, "Little master, what are you looking for?" "We're here for consultation. Ask the best doctor here to come." "How?" Said with the appearance of a little adult. Because he was already a young boy with an outstanding temperament, the medicine hall's apprentice didn't dare to look down on him. Chapter 45-41. This is Dr. Feng from our Huichun Hall. He has been practicing medicine for decades and has excellent skills. The pharmacist then turned to the old man. "Dr. Feng, these are here for consultation." The old man stroked his beard and looked at the children before him. He then looked at the guard standing behind them and asked, "Who wants to be consulted? Give me your hand." Before Hao could speak, Mu Chun walked forward and sat on the stool in front of him. "Me." At the same time, he put his hand on a cushion. The old man reached out to check his pulse and stroked his beard with his other hand. After a while, he retracted his hand and looked seriously at Mu Chen's face. Finally, he said, "You're not sick. Your body is very good. It's just that you've been a little restless these past 2 nights and can't sleep well. I'll prescribe you some calming medicine later, and you'll be fine." Mu Chun saw that he did not ask anything and could tell that he had been restless these past 2 days. He pursed his lips and looked at his elder brother. Hao saw this and said, "My brother's heart has been beating very fast these past few days, and he's feeling uneasy and panicked. Is there really no other problem?" Doctors hated being questioned the most. Hearing Hao's words, Dr. Feng's face darkened. "He's just restless. There's no other problem. His body is very good. Even if you find a few more patients for him, they'll say the same." His hand that was stroking his beard paused, and he looked at Hao. "It's such a small symptom. This old man won't make a mistake." Hearing this, Hao said to Yu, "Come here." Mu Chun stood up and stood to the side. Yu went forward and sat down. She blinked at the old man in front of her and said with a bit of fear in her childish voice, "Grandpa, I haven't been sleeping well these past few days. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and sometimes I jump very fast here. When I jump very fast, I get very scared. Grandpa, am I seriously ill? Will I die?" The little girl's tender voice was filled with fear and helplessness. Her small appearance was so cute and lovable. When Dr. Feng saw this, he couldn't help but think of his own granddaughter. As a result, his originally gloomy face eased a little. He smiled and said slowly, "Don't be afraid. Come, give me your hand. Let me have a look." In. Yu nodded her head, stretched out her small hand, and placed it on the cushion, while looking at him stretching out his hand to check her pulse. After taking her pulse, Dr. Feng carefully looked at her face. Finally, he said, "Young lady, don't worry. You're not sick. Your body is fine. However, you're just like your brother, feeling uneasy. This isn't a big deal. You'll be fine after taking some calming medicine." "Thank you, Grandpa." Seeing this, Yu sweetly thanked him. Hao thought for a moment and said, "Then get the doctor to prescribe some calming medicine." Dr. Feng glanced at him and wrote down a prescription. 17 took the prescription and went to the front to pick the herbs. Hao asked Dr. Feng about some things to pay attention to. After thanking him, he took his sister-in-law to the front to look for Jiang Qixing. Then, he heard a reprimand coming from the front. "You bastard! Look where you're going." It was a man's scolding voice. It was very clear in this quiet Huichun hall. When Hao, Mu Chun, and Mu Yu came over, the three people's expressions changed slightly because the person being scolded was none other than 17, who went to pick the herbs and pay the bill. Chapter 45-42. At this moment, 17 was glaring angrily at the man who slapped him and the woman beside him. They were the ones who bumped into him earlier, but before he could react, they had already raised their hands to slap him. It was so fast and fierce that he did not even know how they did it. All he knew was that one side of his ear was ringing and the other side of his face was burning with pain. 17, what's going on? Howard walked over and asked coldly. Young master. 17 suppressed his anger and took a step back. Moving his lips, he shook his head and said, Young master, let's go back. It was just a slap. He had endured it. They had no power here, and no one to back them up. As an adult, he knew that under such circumstances, he could not cause trouble for the young masters and ladies. Go back. Huh, you haven't apologized to us yet. You want to leave now? The man saw that 17 had retreated and laughed coldly. His tone was arrogant and contemptuous, and his gaze fell on him. Answer, Howard said coldly. Hearing this, 17 paused for a moment, then said, I had paid the bill and was about to look for young master when they bumped into me. However, just as I was about to back away, this man gave me a slap. Yes, I slapped you. What's wrong? The man said arrogantly, taking a step forward and raising his hand to slap 17's face again. But at this time, he felt a pain in his calf and his knee bent. He actually knelt down with a cry of pain. Hiss. Ah. The man knelt down unexpectedly, his hands tightly hugging his leg. At first glance, it looked like he was kneeling in front of 17. 17 was stunned. Looking at the small figure standing at the side, he called out blankly, Young Master Chin. At that moment, he only saw young Master Chin step forward and kick the man's calf. That kick must have hit the man's bone. The man's cry of pain was very pitiful. He hit you, so hit him back. Mu Chun said with a straight face. His small figure stood there, looking like a little adult. He didn't think too much about it. He only knew that 17 was one of them, and he couldn't let anyone bully her. Brother, the girl beside him exclaimed and reached out to push him away. What are you doing? Unfortunately, she did not manage to push him away because he avoided her. Little brat, I'll kill you. The man cursed while covering his leg. He stood up and reached for Mu Chen's collar. Howard, who was standing at the side, naturally wouldn't let him touch Mu Chen. Seeing that man make a move, just when he was about to make a move, he heard Yuer's voice. Big brother, use this. Yuer took out a broom from who knows where and directly handed the broom to her big brother. The apothecary, who didn't want to cause any trouble, watched from the side. When he saw the little girl actually pick up the broom and hand it over, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. Whose child was this? It was really. How? Or glanced at Yuer, then took the broom from her hand. At the same time, he pushed Mu Chun to the back, and the broom in his hand directly slapped towards that man. Ah, damn little brat. The broom directly hit his face. He only felt a pain in his nose, followed by a warm feeling. 2 streams of blood flowed from his nostrils. Brother, your nose is bleeding. Chapter 45-43. Hearing this, Yuer's eyes widened. Her clear and innocent eyes were full of astonishment. She glared at the girl and complained to her brother. Brother, she's scolding us. A mad dog always barks. Don't mind her. Ow. Glanced at the man with the nosebleed and said to 17 and Mu Chun, let's go. He threw the broom in his hand to the pharmacist and held Yuer's little hand as they walked out. However, just as they were about to leave, the man who had recovered wiped his nosebleed and punched Howard's back. Want to leave? You'll have to ask my fist first. Hey, be careful. The pharmacist saw the man attacking from behind and couldn't help but whisper a warning. After all, the man was only a child in his teens. How could he withstand the power of his punch? If this punch landed on the child's body, he was afraid that even if he didn't die, he would be crippled. Howard narrowed his eyes when he felt the fierce wind from the punch coming from behind him. He turned around and grabbed the hand that was attacking him and bent it downwards. At the same time, the tip of his foot flew up and kicked that person's chin. He spun in the air and landed steadily. At that moment, that person's bones were broken and he screamed in pain. The next moment, he fell backward. Bam! Brother! With a loud thud, the young girl cried out in alarm. She hurried to his side and helped him up. She looked at the child with a cold face in shock. You. Blood seeped out of the man's mouth. His chin hurt so much that he couldn't speak. His hand was in so much pain that he couldn't even raise it. The pharmacist was already dumbfounded and stood at the side with a broom. Even Dr. Feng, who heard the commotion and came out to take a look, was stunned by the scene. 17 and Mu Chun came to Hao Er's side. Hao Er looked at the man who had fallen to the ground with a frosty expression and said coldly, "This is just a lesson. If you dare to attack us again, I will cripple you." No one tried to stop them. They just watched as the three children left with their guards. After a long while, a deep and dignified voice came, causing Dr. Feng to come back to his senses. "Find a carriage and send this young master back." The apothecary and old Dr. Feng hurriedly turned their heads when they heard the voice. They saw a middle-aged man wearing a black brocade robe standing at the top of the stairs on the second floor. When they saw him, they hurriedly bowed. "Boss!" After saluting, the apothecary hurriedly stepped forward to help the man up. He then went outside to find a carriage to send the man off. After exiting the rejuvenation hall, 17 drove the carriage and led them away. She asked, "Young master, are we going back or are we going to other places? Let's go to the candy store at the end of the street for some sugar water." "Ow," or said as he looked at Mu Chun and Mu Yu. "I'll bring you two to drink some sugar water before we go back. Is there anything else you want to eat? Big brother will take you to eat." The two little guys shook their heads. "Big brother, the old doctor said that we are not sick. Is that true?" "Yes, since the doctor said so, there should be nothing wrong with your bodies. Don't worry," Howard said. Chapter 45-44. Shichi, who was driving the carriage, was also worried. "Young master, we beat someone up today. I'm afraid that person won't let it go. Should we avoid them? We were just defending ourselves. Why would we be afraid of them finding trouble with us?" Hao Er's eyes turned cold when he thought of that person's cursing and injuring actions. Breaking his hand was already teaching him a lesson. If he still dared to find trouble with them, then what was the harm in fighting again? His parents had taught him that he shouldn't cause trouble, but he shouldn't be afraid of trouble either. If someone bullied him, he shouldn't endure it. He should teach them a lesson first. Even if he couldn't beat them, he could still escape first. However, he had thought about it before he attacked. The strength of the people on Floating Fate Immortal Island wasn't very strong. His strength was enough to deal with some trouble. If not, there was still the Silver Wolf to protect them. Therefore, he wasn't afraid of those people finding trouble with them. Hearing his words, 17 didn't say anything else. When they arrived at the Sweetwater shop, they found a table to sit down and drink sweet water. At this moment, Hao Er's eyes moved slightly. He silently glanced at a certain spot on the street and then retracted his gaze. Someone was following them. Who was it? Was it the man who was beaten up in Rejuvenation Hall? Or was it someone else? He pondered, but didn't show it on his face. After drinking the sugar water with his sister-in-law, he didn't wander around other places. Instead, he sat in the carriage and returned to the small courtyard. When the carriage arrived at the entrance of the small courtyard, he felt that the person who had been following them left after seeing them enter the small courtyard. In the attic of Rejuvenation Hall, a secret guard was reporting his findings after following them. This subordinate watched them enter the small courtyard and left. After that, I asked around and found out that there were only 3 children and a guard living in that small courtyard. They rented it not long ago. After they moved in, they rarely went out. Usually, only their guard went out to the restaurant to bring back some food. This subordinate asked around, but no one knew where they came from. Hearing this, the black-robed man sitting and drinking tea waved his hand. The secret guard quietly left. After a while, another secret guard came in. "Master, the one who was beaten is the second young master of the Yang family in the city. The Yang family has sent people to inquire about the background of those children. Other than that, the Yang family has not made any other movements. You may leave," the black-robed middle-aged man said as he played with the teacup in his hand. After the secret guard left, the middle-aged man asked, "What do you think?" Behind him, an old man stepped forward and said, "Master, that guard's strength is only at the second layer of the Qi refining realm. The twins aren't very strong, but their spiritual aura is very pure, which is very rare. As for the teenager, his skills are extraordinary, and his aura is restrained. Even I can't tell the extent of his strength. The black-clothed, middle-aged man's expression changed slightly as he said, "Those 3 children are still young, but they have a noble aura. Especially the older one. His methods are even more ruthless. An ordinary clan wouldn't be able to raise such a child." His voice paused for a moment before he said, "The people from the aristocratic families in the city more or less know a little about him, but there are very few disciples who can compare with him. It seems that he should be the son of an aristocratic family from another city." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.